Sorry about that. So hello everyone, thank you for joining us today for this fourth webinar of the ACE webinar series entitled Planting the Seed, Empowering the Next Generation on Co-op Rural Development Professionals. So we are very glad today to have you here with us. Before we start, a few words about ACE. So ACE is an international nonprofit organization that has for mission to strengthen cooperatives and the cooperative movement by promoting innovative educational responses to social and economic changes. And ACE is very proud to present this webinar series sponsored by CHF Foundation. So today's webinar is entitled Setting Up and Developing Farm Cooperatives, and it's presented by Laurence Gendron. So Laurence has a bachelor's degree in agroeconomics from l'Université Laval in Quebec, and she has been working for the Quebec Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries and Food in the Mauricie region for more than 2 years now. So thank you, Laurence, for being here with us today. So if any of you have a question, please feel free to use the chat box, and Laurence will answer them at the end of the presentation. So Laurence, the floor is yours now.
Thanks, Caroline, and hi, everyone. Thank you for being there. I'm happy to be here today to teach you some of the concepts about farm cooperatives that we have here in the province of Quebec for agricultural material sharing and for labor sharing. The title of my presentation has changed a little bit from the poster. So it's Farm Machinery Cooperatives and Farm Labor Cooperatives in Quebec, sharing costs to generate savings. So we will see throughout the presentation how it is possible for farmers in Quebec to generate savings through this kind of cooperatives. So I hope this will be useful to you, and I will be pleased, as Caroline said, to answer to your questions at the end of the presentation. So let's begin. Okay. Sorry. Okay. So in the current context in Quebec, but not only, I guess, farmers face an increasingly restrictive socioeconomic environment. As you know, today's agriculture requires considerable investment in farm equipment, which often leads to high production costs. This results in financial challenges in which technological innovation often turns out to be inaccessible. And finally, another increasing concerns that the farmers have is the lack of skilled and experienced labor, which is everywhere, and agriculture is no exception to that. So farmers struggling with a precarious economic situation face many challenges and often must think of a different way of doing things. And this might be, for example, by increasing gross revenues, by even working harder maybe, but sometimes it's not always possible. So that's why we think about why not reducing costs of production. So the establishment of farm machinery cooperatives and farm labor cooperatives is a solution to these increasing production costs. It's also a solution to the need for a variety of specialized equipment to implement more efficient practices in the farm. And it can be actually a solution to the need to address the shortage of agricultural labor. So let's start with the farm machinery cooperatives. I will use the acronym CUMA, CUMA, in the rest of my presentation relative to this kind of cooperatives. It's actually, what is it, a CUMA? It's an agricultural cooperative governed by the Cooperatives Act, here in Quebec. And to apply for the constitution of a cooperative, of a Kuma in Quebec, there's a need for at least 5 funding farms that have common economic and social needs. And what is the purpose of the Kuma? It's to pool the use of machinery, equipment, tools, inputs, such as fertilizer, lime, or diesel, at the lowest possible cost. Another purpose of the Kuma is to provide a legal framing for farms that jointly use agricultural material. So Kumas are defined as cooperatives for the use of agricultural material and not only agricultural machinery. So it's really agricultural material in general. A little bit of history to put us into context. Kumas were first created in France back in 1945, when there was a reorganization of agriculture back there. And so Kumas were developed to promote access to mechanization in small-scale farming areas where the cost of individual mechanization made it inaccessible. And more recently, in 2015, in France, there were more than 12,000 Kumas, which included 200,000 members. This represents nearly 50% of the total number of farms in France, so that's pretty much. And the total annual investment, which is pretty interesting, is 400 million euros. It was actually in 2015. In comparison, in Quebec, Canada, the attention was first focused on Kumas in 1989, and the two first Kumas were created in 1991. And in 2015, there were in Quebec 60 Kumas, which were regrouping about 2,000 members, which represent only 7% of the total number of farms in Quebec. And we didn't get the total annual investment of the Kumas in Quebec, but we have the total value of assets, which is which was of about $21 million in 2015. So as you see, it's a little bit a smaller market here in Quebec, and it's still under development, but still there's a lot of potential, and actually it's interesting that it actually exists. So now we'll go through the working process of a Kuma. So how does it work actually? So first of all, who can be a member of a Kuma? In Quebec, all those who have the status of agricultural producers in accordance with the Farm Producers Act. And also all those who are willing to share and to be working partners and to invest and save together, so with others. And how does it work? How can a producer, a farmer, can use pooled material? Through a Kuma, actually, he must be a member of the Kuma. And to do so, he must hold a number of common shares or qualifying shares of $10 each. That is prescribed by bylaw of the Kuma. So the farmer becomes a member of the Kuma first, and then he must join a branch of activity. And what is a branch of activity? It's a unit of joint use of agricultural material. So, for example, if a set of farmers are interested in using a seeder, for example, 4 farmers are interested in using a seeder together, they can become a member of a Kuma, and then the Kuma will create a branch of activity for a seeder, and the 4 farmers will join the branch of activity, and so they will be able to use the equipment together. And to join a branch of activity, the member must sign a contract of engagement with the or we call it also a subscription contract or a commitment contract, but I will use the term contract of engagement in the presentation today. So the member signs this contract, which means that he undertakes to use Kuma's material throughout the term of financing. So he really engages himself to use the material during the contract. And in the contract, also the member will specify his intended use of the equipment, which will be expressed in specific unit. Is it in hectares or in hay bales if it's for a hay baler? It really depends on the equipment we're talking about. But signing the contract, the producer will have to think of his potential use of the equipment during the year. And also the member will have to pay the investment shares. And what are the investment shares? It's the share of each member of the branch, their share of the 20% of the purchase cost of the material. So if we go back to our example of 4 members in the branch, the 20% of the purchase cost, which corresponds basically to the down payment of the investment, will be divided between the 4 members. So each member will have to pay 5% of the purchase cost, and this will represent its investment shares that he will pay. And investment shares basically give the producer the right to use the equipment. So these are the 2 main conditions to be met by the member of the Kuma when joining a branch. And now, once the member is in the branch of activity, he has signed his contract, he engaged himself to use the equipment. He obviously during the contract, during the years he will use the equipment, he will have to pay the usage costs according to his use of the equipment. So the usage costs are calculated by the Kuma and are billed by the Kuma to the members. And so the Kuma uses, to do so actually, the Kuma uses the number of units entered in the contract of each member. You remember I talked about that in the contract of engagement section. So so that's it. And then the Kuma issues quarterly invoices. The first 3 invoices are based on cost estimates, and the 4th and final invoices will be adjusted to the member's real use of the equipment. So basically, the Kuma took into account the intended use of the equipment of each member, and based his invoices on this. And at the end of the year, the 4th and final invoice will be adjusted to the real use of the equipment. And now, another part of the Kuma is the funding. So remember, I talked about the qualifying shares that we have to pay if we want to become a member of a Kuma. So the amount of qualifying shares serve as a working capital for the Kuma. So each Kuma has a number of common shares or qualifying shares that they required when joining a Kuma. So it might be, for example, 5 qualifying shares of $10. It might be 10 qualifying shares of $10. It really depends on the bylaws of the Kuma. So this is the part of working capital. And then when we're talking really about the investments, buying equipment to be used, so we have our investment shares of 20% of the purchase cost that is paid by the members of the branch of activity, and this is used as a down payment for the purchase of the equipment. And the remaining 80% of the purchase price is financed by a conventional loan. Regarding funding, it's important to mention that members must not endorse the CUMA for funding. Only the property purchase is given as a guarantee. Really, the member's responsibility is limited to the respect of his contract and to the payment and of his usage cost. At the beginning, I stated that one of the purpose of the CUMA was to provide a legal framing for farmers who want to jointly use agricultural material. So here, a few words about the legal framing of a CUMA. A CUMA is a legal person. In accordance with the Cooperatives Act and the regulations, a CUMA adopts bylaws or rules of internal management. A CUMA is also managed by a board of directors and holds annual general meetings. The CUMA may purchase, sell, build, mortgage, or borrow. The CUMA is the owner of the goods, is the sole owner of the goods. The members within the branches are users of the goods, but the CUMA is really the owner. And by joining a branch of activity, as I said earlier, the member gives himself a right to use the equipment. And what is an interesting point is that when a member leaves the CUMA, the board of directors reimburses its qualifying shares and rights of use, the investment shares we were talking about earlier. And he will, the board of directors will reimburse it in each of the branches the members to which the members had exceeded. So this might be a little abstract right now, but I will show you a diagram a little bit further in the presentation. So I think it will help better understand how this all works. Actually, that's it. That's the diagram, the organizational structure. So on top you have the CUMA. In this example, there are 7 members in the CUMA. So you see to create the CUMA, a minimum of 5 farms is required, 5 founding farms. To be members, there are qualifying shares to pay, qualifying shares of $10, and then there are the members of the CUMA. The CUMA is managed by a board of directors, which is composed of 5 to 7 directors. And the board of directors is where all the important decisions regarding the CUMA are taken. Also, the board of directors must demonstrate leadership and long-term vision for the development of the CUMA. And then you see the activity branches. We have 3 examples here. We have a hay baler activity branch, a seeder activity branch, and a harvester and tractor activity branch. So typically, actually, an activity branch corresponds to the use of one type of material. However, it is possible that more than one type of material is associated to a branch of activity, as long as all the members within the branch use the material. And if we take the hay baler branch, for example, we see that there are 4 members in this branch, and we see at the bottom of the page that the investment shares are of 5% per member, so 20% divided by 4. And each of the branch has a branch manager The branch manager is responsible for the how do I say, to responsible to plan the work, to ensure the compliance with contract. He's also responsible to define the order of use of the material. He also ensures the link between the branch and the board of directors. And some branch managers are also responsible for the storage of the equipment, for example. It's interesting to note also that usually in each equipment there is a logbook. The logbook allows the users to enter the history of use of the equipment and the history of repairs also. So that allows the CUMA to properly bill each of the users for the equipment they used. So I hope this is clear. And I forgot to say that each of the branch must count at least 3 members. If it's less than 3, it doesn't work. A branch cannot be created. We need to have 3 members per branch at the minimum. I have prepared purchase examples to help you understand all the potential on the economic side, if I can say that, all the potential of the CUMA formula. So this one is for a hay baler, for example. So we have a hay baler activity branch. And we have, for example, the purchase cost of the equipment, which is $40,000 in this case. The investment share, which represent 20% of the purchase cost, is equal to $8,000. In this case, I haven't shown it on this table, but there are 4 members in this branch, so it would mean $2,000 per user of this branch. And so the remaining 80% of the investments, $32,000, will be financed by a conventional loan. In comparison, when we look at the individual purchase, we have the same equipment, so $40,000. We don't have investment shares in this case, but we have a down payment, of course, of 20% that we have assumed. And obviously, the remaining amount of money will have to be financed also, or actually paid by this producer. Let's take a look at the annual costs associated with the use of this equipment on the in the two categories, so the CUMA or the individual purchase. When we look at the ownership costs, we see the annual payments in the first line, annual payments based on a 5-year loan at 5% interest. The amortization period is often pretty short because in the CUMA concept, brand new equipment are favored. So after 5 years, a new equipment at the cutting edge of the technology might be purchased. So we have used here an amortization of 5 years, and also usually the amortization of the loan is equivalent to the duration of the contract of engagement. So in this case, it corresponds to payments, annual payments, capital and interest of about let's say $7,000. And then if we go a little bit lower, we see fixed costs, for example, insurance and storage. We have assumed they represented 1% of the purchase cost, about approximately. And we have maintenance and repairs, which we assume they represented about 2% of the purchase cost. And we have general fees and the treasurer's salary in the CUMA. So important fees to ensure the that the Kuma is functional, if I can say that. So we have total cost for the hay baler activity branch of about $9,800. If we take a look at the individual purchase in comparison, we see that the depreciation, actually we used the straight line basis with a useful life of 10 years and a residual value in this case of 30%. And 10 years here, it's because for a single farmer who will buy a hay baler, for example, we can expect he will keep his equipment for more than 5 years. So basically probably 10 years at least. So that's why we use 10 years for the depreciation calculation. After that, we have calculated average annual cost, annual interest, sorry, 5% on 10 years, or basically it's $1,000 on average per year. We have also fixed costs such as insurance and storage with $400. Maintenance and repairs also, we have estimated it would be a little bit lower than in the Kuma activity branch because there are less users, it is less used, so we expected it would cost a little bit less with an individual purchase. And then no general fees and no treasurer's salary, of course, because we're not in the Kuma. So the total cost here for the individual purchase is $4,600. So annual costs, total annual costs are lower in the case of the individual purchase. And now it is interesting to look at the costs per users or per unit produced. So we have our total cost on first line, $9,000 with the hay baler activity branch and $4,000 with the individual purchase. The number of users in the hay baler activity branch, it's 4. So compared to only 1 with the individual purchase. So we can expect that the average costs per user in the case of the Kuma will be of about $2,400. And when we look at the individual purchase, it's $4,600. But what is more interesting is to look at the costs per unit produced. So with the Kuma, we expect that more hay bales will be produced because there are more users. So in this case, we assume that there would be 2,800 hay bales produced annually, compared to, in the individual case, 700 hay bales produced. So the cost per unit will be in the Kuma of about $3 per hay bales, and in the individual purchase of about $6 per hay bales. So more expensive in the case of the individual purchase. So how does it impact the bill or the invoices delivered to the farms, the members actually? For example, we have farm A, B, C, and D. Each of the farms has used the equipment at a different level. For example, Farm A used 400 hay bales, as Farm C used for 1,000 hay bales. So the cost, the total annual cost varies between $1,000 to $3.8 thousand per farm, while in the individual purchase it was $4,600. So there are savings to be made with the Kuma activity branches, as you see in the 4th column. And what is most interesting, well, not most interesting, but what we have to remember is that at the end of the contract of engagement, the investment shares that the growers paid are reimbursed. So the $2,000 the member paid at the beginning as its right of use of the equipment will be given back to him. So, which is not the case when we're talking about an individual purchase. I have appended another example with a mower. I will go pretty quickly through it. It's just because it's a little bit different in the way of presenting, if I can say that. So we'll see. So in this example, the purchase cost is more about the $70,000. We have our investment shares, which represent 20% of the purchase cost, and the loan to be contracted is $55,000. In the same, pretty much the same situation in the case of the individual purchase. But what is interesting to note is that the down payment in the case of the individual purchase has to be supported only by one person, one farm, while in the case of the activity branch, it's divided by the number of users in the activity branch. So the annual cost, again, here, it's another example with this time it's a 7-year loan at 5% interest. And there are still our fixed costs, maintenance costs, and general fees and treasurer's salary for to administrate the CUMA, with a total cost of about $14,000 annually here. While the individual purchase, the depreciation was calculated again on a straight line basis with a useful life of 10 years. With a residual value of 10%, the average annual interest of 5% also, and so there are also some fixed costs included, maintenance and repairs, and no fees related to the administration of the CUMA, of course, and we have a total of $9,000 in this case. So in this example, the number of users in the activity branch is 5. So the average cost per user is $2,700 in this activity branch, while in the individual purchase, it's $9,000. And when we express it in dollars per hectare, actually, we can see that the CUMA, the activity branch, allows to cover a larger surface than the individual purchase, with 170 hectares and 35 hectares with the individual purchase. So to come back to the cost per unit, we have $82 per hectare with the CUMA, and $268 per hectare with the individual purchase. So again, when we look at the use of the mower by each of the farms, we see the cost, the annual cost per farm is much lower actually than if the equipment had been bought individually. So there are savings to make here. So I just shown some really, how do I say that, evident, if I can say that, advantages, economic advantages of being a member of an activity branch of a CUMA. And so we can think that CUMA improves farm financial health because it allows members to share financial risk and reduce debt. Also, it allows producers to actually produce at the lowest possible cost and to increase their farm general efficiency and working condition, because they have now access to more powerful and efficient machinery and equipment, and they can also maybe eliminate unproductive equipment. Other advantages of Kumas is that it might be possible to introduce grower to diversified activities because the equipment become more accessible. And it might allow us also a better possibility of expansion or transfer. There are also human advantages related to Kumas, though. So, for example, it allows to develop personal and relationship through communication, exchange of information, and working method. So it's very it's a way to self-train. It's a way for a farmer to self-train, if I can say that. Also, it's a good way, being part of a Kuma is a good way to develop the cooperative values, which are, for example, the concern of others, solidarity, sharing, and mutual support among members. It also it might allow actually a healthier balance between professional and personal life. There are obviously challenges of being part of a Kuma and a cooperative in general, I would say. Among those challenges, there is the availability of equipment, of machinery, and maybe services. And also, the relationships between members might be a challenge. The fact that everyone has different work methods may be a challenge as well. And for example, in the case of the Kuma, the high machine handling might accelerate the wear. So now that we have talked a lot about the cooperatives for agricultural material sharing, we will see a little bit, we will learn more about the cooperatives for labor sharing. So I will start with Kumo, which is pretty similar to Kuma actually. You will see some differences. Kumo is an agricultural cooperatives. It's governed by the Cooperatives Act. And again, to apply for the constitution of a Kumo, at least 5 founding farms are also required. Although, in the case of a Kumo, a minimum of 30 founding farms has been identified to be necessary, actually, to make the cooperative economically viable, to make it functional, so that it offers services at reasonable costs. So that's a particularity of Kumo, and you will see why later on. The purpose of a Kumo is to make 1 or more employees available to the farm members, and it is to bring farms together so that they can have access through the pooling of labor to qualified, reliable, and year-round available employees. To join a branch of activity of a Kumo, actually, the farm must be a member of the Kumo. It must pay an annual contribution, which will cover its share of the cooperative's operating expenses and administration fees. And it will also have to sign an annual contract of engagement in which it retains the services of the Kumo employee for a specified number of hours. So, for example, a farmer would say, okay, I need I need an employee 2 days a week. So if he signs a contract of engagement with the Kumo, he will have to respect the fact that his intended use was 2 days per week. So obviously, to join a branch of activity, the farm must plan its needs. So I just gave the example that the farmer needed an employee for 2 days a week, but obviously the farmer must plan his needs. He must also think that he will have to invest time for employee training. For example, describe the work to be done and coach the new employee. Also, the farmer will have to share the farm's contacts so that the employee can refer to them if necessary. He will also need to have a liability insurance. Sorry. So I have present here a diagram of a Kumo. So we have the Kumo on top with, as I told you, the minimum of 30 farms to ensure the sustainability of the Kumo. The Kumo is still is also managed by the board of directors, although the board of directors entrusts the management of its mission to the coordinator. So the coordinator is really responsible of the all the human aspect of the management of the Kumo, such as for example work conditions, schedule, pay administration. He really is the coordinator of all these aspects. So it's a very important role. And then you see the employee who will work full-time, 40 hours a week, 4 weeks per month, so 160 hours a month. And you have the activity branches at the bottom. So we see that the activity branches can be regrouping farms with the same type of production: beef, sheep, dairy, etc. But more and more often we see cooperatives, actually we see branches in Kumo that do not have necessarily the same production, but because they are located in a close area, they will create a branch, and the members of the branch will use the services of an employee. So this is an example. And there are other possibility for activity branches within a Kumo, which is interesting, I think, very interesting actually. Besides the farm worker that we just talked about, there are the work and family balance, or there actually it's like a family attendant, if I can say that. So someone who comes in the houses and to help to help the family in general. So that is another service that can be offered by a branch of a Kuma. And another service that is under development actually is the agricultural secretariat. So this will be interesting also to develop. So there's really a potential here with the different services that can be offered with the Kumos. So the Kumo is an ideal solution for small and medium-sized farm that need manpower but cannot necessarily afford the costs of a full-time employee. And Kumo is also a good way for farms that already have a permanent employee but need sporadically actually additional manpower. So we talked about Kumo as labor cooperatives, but in Quebec there are also other cooperative alternative actually to for labor sharing, and I wanted to present them to you. I have prepared a table here to compare the three of them so that you can see easily the differences between each. So first of all, on the column, the left column, we have the Kumo. In the middle, we have the Solidarity Co-op of Agricultural Replacement Services and a labor branch within the Kuma. So these cooperative are a little bit different. In fact, the type of cooperative is different. The Solidarity Co-op is a solidarity a cooperative, actually, and the CUMA and CUMO are agricultural cooperatives. And all these co-ops are governed by the Cooperatives Act in Quebec. They are just not governed by exactly the same chapter of this act. In all cases, the minimum number of founding farm is 5. However, as I said earlier, in the case of the CUMO, a minimum of 30 farms is necessary to ensure the overall viability of the CUMO. The membership is different when we talk about CUMO or CUMA and relative to the Solidarity Co-op. For CUMO and CUMA, the members are agricultural producers or becoming agricultural producers, and they are users, actually. So, and if they are not user right now, they will be user. So that's the kind of member we can find in these two co-ops. While in the case of the Solidarity Co-op, there are 3 different kinds of members. The user members who can actually use the services of the co-op. There are worker members, and supporting members. The supporting members are any organizations that have economical, human, or social reason to be part of the Solidarity Co-op. So the advantages to have supporting members, it's that the co-op is in a way ensured to have a certain financing from outside the organization. Now talking about costs, there are similarities between the 3. For example, of course, to be member of a co-op, we always have to pay the qualifying shares of $10 each. And when we use the services of an employee, we obviously have to pay his hourly rate and all the fees related to the management of the cooperative and the insurance, etc. So this is similar between the 3 co-ops. But annual contribution is required in the case of the CUMO and the Solidarity Co-op, while it's not required in the labor branch within a CUMA. And here we see the purpose of each of these co-ops. For CUMA and the labor branch within the for the CUMO and the labor branch within the CUMA, the purpose is pretty similar. It's to pool the labor, of course, and especially to give farmers access to qualified, reliable, and year-round available employees. So we're really expecting stability here. And so that's the purpose of the CUMO and the labor branch of the CUMA. So a farm would say, okay, I need an employee at least once a week. So there's really the concept of stability in this case. While when we are looking at the Solidarity Co-op of agricultural replacement services, the purpose is to provide farmers with a skilled workforce when an emergency occurs. So for example, an accident, a disease, a death. So we are really in an emergency concept as opposed to in the CUMA and the labor branch of the CUMO and the labor branch of the CUMA, we are in a stability perspective. So this is a major difference between the two. So in the case of the Solidarity Co-op, our producer broke his knee. He calls the Solidarity Co-op and he says, I need someone to work at my farm next week. Can you find someone for me? And as long as the farmer has paid his as long as he is actually a member of the Solidarity Co-op, and as long as he has paid his annual contribution, he has the right to use the services. So the fact that the objectives are not exactly the same, stability versus emergency, there is no contract of engagement in the Solidarity Co-op since it's not predictable, not really predictable. While in Kuma and Kumo, yes, there is a contract of engagement. The scope of these these cooperatives, the Solidarity Co-op is much more spread over the whole province of Quebec, so it's larger. The Kumo is a little bit more of how can I say that? It's regional, so it's a little bit less spread over Quebec, if I can say that. And the labor branch within the Kuma is local, so it's really smaller actually. And I will finish with the challenges that we identify with each of these cooperatives. Of course, the labor recruitment is always a challenge. In the case of a Kumo, of course, the high number of members that is necessary to make the Kumo viable is a challenge. Funding sources are also challenges. To the need to innovate to attract new farms is also a challenge in Kumo. You remember we talked about farm workers, family attendant, and agricultural secretariat. So innovating is a challenge in this case. And also uncompetitive wages might be a challenge because it makes it harder to recruit labor. Solidarity Co-op, the funding sources are also a challenge. As in the Kuma labor branch, we have the uncompetitive wages, which might be limiting, because we have to say that in the Solidarity Co-op in Quebec, the wage is a little bit higher than with the Kumo and the Kuma. So it's more attractive for workers. So I would finish saying that from the experience that we have here in Quebec, the labor branch within a Kuma appears to be the option with the best, the highest opportunities, because it's more accessible. We're talking about a branch, so we don't need to have many producers. We can have 4 to 10 maybe producers per branch, and it's okay. And the cost, it's still accessible also regarding the costs. So overall, it's this option regarding labor sharing in Quebec, which represent the highest potential. So that's the end of my presentation. I will just finish saying that obviously there are benefits for partners to work together. Cooperation is not innate; it has to be developed. So I hope that this was useful for you. If you have any question, do not hesitate to ask. I think someone asked a question. We will look at it. And that's it. I thank you for your attention. It's very appreciated.
So thank you, Laurence, for your presentation. So if you have any question, please use the chat box. So we have a question here. It says, it looks like there are less challenges in the Kuma model than Kumo. What are the pros and cons of each model?
I would say the pros and cons. Okay, the the counts actually of the Kumo, it would be that there's a need to have the coordinator, which requires a certain amount of money to pay this coordinator. So and because we need this coordinator, that's why we need a minimum of enterprise of farms in the Kumo. So I was talking about a minimum of 30 farms, which is might be sometimes difficult to find. In Quebec, we have a Kumo, and there's 32 farms in the Kumo, so it's really the minimum, if I can say that. So I will just take a look at the. Okay, so this is accounts of the Kumo model. So the fact that there's this coordinator might increase the cost for the farmers at the end. It's not an easy question actually. For the I'm just trying to think about the counts of the Kuma. I have some difficulty to find because, as I said, it's accessible. So I think it's an interesting option because if you have already a Kuma structure, you can just only add a branch of activity with the labor, and it's pretty simple to manage. So these are pros of the Kuma model, and the Kumo model, obviously, if you have the number of farms required, it can be a very interesting structure also. So I don't know. I hope this answer helps a little bit.
Thank you, Laurence, for this answer. We have another question here. So it says, thank you so much for the presentation. Can you point to successful examples of the different models that we can explore for further research?
Successful examples. The successful examples, I think, are the examples that we have and that work here in Quebec. So I was talking about the Solidarity Cooperative that we have in Quebec. There are 85 farms that joined this cooperative, and the objective is to have 150. So this is really it's really useful for the farmer. As I said, when an accident occurs, an emergency occurs, it's very useful to have access to labor like this who can help. So this is a successful model. And as I said, there are 60 Kumas in Quebec, so with many branches. So I think the formula works well. And there is one Kumo in Quebec. This is a little bit more difficult, but it still works. And as I said, because we are trying to diversify the services offered, we can think that this will help also in the future to give services to farmers and to share cost, still share cost.
Thank you. Is there any other question? No other question. Thank you so much, Laurence, for your presentation, and to everyone for being here today with us. So our next webinar will be next Thursday. It will be on Co-op New Generation, and it will be in French at 2 o'clock Eastern Time. Meanwhile, you can visit the ACE website, or if you want more resources to learn and teach about co-ops, you can go on ed.coop. And so if nobody has any further question, this will end the fourth webinar of the series. Thank you very much.
Caroline,
yes.
If someone wants to communicate with me directly, does he have my email address, or because I could share it, and if if I didn't answer well to questions or anything, we could talk after this presentation, or another day. It doesn't matter, but I could leave my email address.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Can you leave your address in the chat box?
Yeah, sure, I'll do it.
Okay, so thank you, Laurence, for this. So as Laurence said, if you have any further questions in the near future, you feel free to write to Laurence, and she will leave our email address in the chat box, and she will answer to you shortly. So thank you very much, everyone. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Thank you.